Sona Singh, interviewing you for the Ovasi Indigenous Knowledge Program. Could you tell us when you started in life?
Well, it's a pleasure talking to you. I hope I can remember everything at the age of 77 now. But I was born and brought up in Mayville. And I schooled at AYS school, that's also in Mayville, in Belair Road. And our school was situated next to the Aryan Benevolent Home, the ABH. And that is where I'm living right now, because Clayton Garden is part and parcel of ABH. And from childhood, I have been very, very interested in music. I loved music. My brothers, my family was also lovers of music. I had 8 brothers, and my late dad also was a musician. And my 8 brothers and I was also involved in it, but they started off an orchestra which was called Akashvani Melodies. And I used to be singing for them, but basically I started singing at AYS because my brother was a Hindi school vernacular teacher there. And that is how I started singing. And we used to take part in the Stitford every year. And he found, my brother found that I was quite keen and I loved music. So that is how he got me into the band. And he tried to teach me to play musical instruments. He tried to teach me to play the organ and the percussion instruments, which I did. He tried to teach me to play the sitar, which is a string instrument. And at that time, I was quite young and I didn't take it seriously. But around 1773, when I visited India, I bought myself a sitar and a tanpura. And that's when I started learning to play the sitar. I mean, I do play it. I'm not a professional player, but I do play the sitar. I entered the Stitford playing that instrument, and I managed to win a gold medal for that. That was in the 80s, and I got along quite well with the band until such time I was married, and my late husband, didn't like me to be in music. So I had stopped for about 15 or 16 years. And that's when I found that I lost my voice a bit. But after he passed away and he passed on, I got back to the band. And I started singing again. I'm not as good at what I used to, but I started singing again. And until recently, and all my brothers, all 8 of them are now late. And it was very sad when they all went one by one, and eventually we were left with 2 brothers, and we still ran the band very successfully. And until such time, one of them passed on, and he used to play the trumpet. And he passed on, but we didn't give up. We had other members, other outside members, and we still ran the band. And my last baby brother, he was the person who sort of managed to control the whole orchestra. And we did quite well. We used to take part in the band contest every year at the City Hall. And there was one year when, I don't know, but I had won as a best female vocalist, and my brother had won as the best male vocalist, and our band, we were awarded the trophy as the best band. And thereafter we continued until such time that the last brother of mine, he went for a bypass. He ended up with heart problem and he went for a bypass. And he started deteriorating with his health. And then to make it worse, he was forced to move away to Johannesburg. And that is how we had to shut shop with the band. And after we closed the band, I really, really do miss music. And it makes me very sad, especially when I watch the programs on TV or attend functions where other bands are playing. It makes me feel very, very sad. But what I do now is there is a group of women, a group that entertains traditional music and songs. When we have our Indian weddings, a day before the wedding, they have functions, and for that particular functions, we call that the harvi, the tilak, and matkor, and that kind of thing. So we have songs appropriate for that particular occasion. So they asked me to come and play the drums. So I play the dhol. We call that the dhol. And I go with them. We are engaged practically every week. Friday nights and Saturday afternoons, I am tied up with them. So I go out and I sing and play the drums with them. And on Mondays, I attend the police forum meeting. I represent Clayton Gardens. Tuesday, we have a little free day. On Wednesdays, we have yoga class at Clayton Garden, which my sister used to conduct. But she came for about 8 years, and now she's 80 plus. So she's having a problem coming there. So I took over. Whatever little I know about yoga asanas, I present that, and I teach the ladies. And on Fridays, well, as I say, I have no maid. I have to do my housework and things. And yeah, and I taught, apart from all these things, I used to teach driving. So I started.
How did that come about?
Yeah. Well, I started as an infant school teacher. I was qualified to teach infants. And 1952, I started teaching. So I taught for about 12 years. And then I was forced to give it up. And that too, it was my husband that was responsible for that, because he wanted me to teach driving. So that's when I left school teaching and I got into the driving school. So I taught driving till recently, when I went to live at Clayton Gardens.
Was that accepted in the Indian community for a lady to teach driving?
Well, I didn't worry about what people had to say, because I felt I wanted to do, and I did what I wanted to do. I always please myself first. And so I taught, because at that time now, I taught for about 45 years to drive, until recently when I went to Clayton Gardens. And I was a pensioner, so I had to give up teaching driving. But I still went and worked for Metro Police as a pointswoman near Musgrave Center. And
Which years were those?
that was, I only gave up that, it's about 3.5 years now. So I worked on the road for about 8 years there. And there were 4 schools there, Crawford and 3 other schools, and they needed somebody there, and I worked there. But eventually that didn't pay me, because to drive up there and then to work and come back again and go back midday in the afternoon, work again and come back, it didn't really pay me. So I gave that up completely. Then I worked for, last year, I worked for KZN Tourism Training Center on the admin and the reception. And I worked till September, and then I went to Australia. I love traveling. that I love. I have traveled throughout the world. My world tour I did in 1970, and I love traveling. So I was gone to Australia and only came back in November. And so when I came back, the principal there wanted me to come back to work, and I told him, no, I am very busy preparing for a show. And unfortunately, this last brother of mine passed away 2.5 years ago. So I did this show in memory of my brothers, because they were all musicians, and we helped ABH all the time whenever they put up shows, and whenever they had functions, our band, we rendered our services free of charge to raise funds for them. And when my brother passed away now, in his memory and my other brother's memory, because they all were linked with the ABH, I thought of doing a show, and I raised fairly good sum of money for them, and the show seemed very, very successful, and I had a good turnout, and the people enjoyed the show. That was just on the 8th of May this year, and the show was called Stardust 2, because we had done Stardust 1 with the band at the City Hall. That was in 1980. So I called this show Stardust 2. Now the people want to know, they enjoyed the show so much so they want me to do Stardust 3. But I am not sure whether I'll be able to manage, because I had to do it single-handed. I had nobody to help me. And to sort of organize, administrate, choreograph, plus participate in the show, and see to ticket sales, and to see to all the other work that goes with the show, it's pretty hard. I found it very, very difficult, because I had to do everything myself, go around putting posters and handbills, distributing handbills, and selling tickets was the most important and most difficult thing I had to do. And by the time you get to the day of the show, you are quite tired. And it was pretty tough, but I managed, with the grace of God, and I think with the guidance of my late brothers, I managed to do the show successfully.
If we can go back to your driving years, I believe you did some motor racing?
Yes. After I got married in 1962, and it so happened that was in April 62. So in September, they were having that All-Star Day at the Westmead circuit in Pinetown. And that's when it was run by the NMCC club. I think I called the Natal Motorcycle and Car Club. And so it so happened my late husband and I decided to take a bash at it. So I entered for that race, and I entered with we had a car, a 220S Mercedes-Benz. So I entered with that. And there were no, at that time there weren't very many female drivers. And there were a few, and we tried to get them to enter, and they were reluctant. So I had to enter with the men, and there were 52 men, and I entered with them. And it so happened that I happened to win that race. And it was quite a thing. It was the Daily News and Mercury and all the papers, all the papers practically had write-ups, and at that time there was no TV, so they interviewed me over the air, and it was quite a thing, and everybody was quite thrilled. And I entered again, but the second time my husband had won. And then I had that opportunity of going at Roy Haskell Circuit in Maritzburg as well. And unfortunately, with this apartheid things, they had the All-Star Day for the whites only. And I asked them if I can enter, because there were ladies who were entering. I asked them if I can enter with them. And they said no, it was for whites only. But they asked me to do a demonstration, which I did. And I enjoyed it. It was quite good. It was fun. And but when I entered in Pinetown, it was at one stage. It was scary because one of the they had a very big Grand Prix, and one of the participants had passed away. He had crashed he went off the road and he had crashed. And when I entered again, every time I came to that particular bend, it was called, I think, a Devil's Leap. And every time I came to that bend, it reminded me of him. And I think it was Gary Hocking who had died. And he didn't die on the spot, but he passed away through the accident. And but that didn't sort of affect me very much, although it made me a bit scared. But I don't know, somehow I was a little daredevil. I didn't mind. And yeah, whatever, even at school days, in the sports and whatever, I never missed out, I never lost out, I always took part. Whether it was...
Which sports did you like best?
Well, I liked motor racing, but at school I liked tennis-court, playing tennis. And that was when I was in primary school. And there was a stage when we had to represent Durban playing against Maritzburg. And myself and my partner, we had won. And I have a little picture of that somewhere too, with the tennis. So I love sports and I love music. And I think after I lost my husband, the two things that I looked for was traveling and music. I love traveling and I love music. But unfortunately, being a pensioner, it makes it hard to travel all the time. But I'm glad I did the world tour in 1970 when it was very, very cheap. It only cost me, the air ticket was just 1,400 rand. And I covered up 24 different airports. And so the countries which was not included in the tour, I did it at a later stage. From then to now, I've done about 15, I've left the country about 15 times. And so I did it separately, like Australia, I did it separately, South America, those days in 1972, they had the Reina Del Mar ship that you should do the boat cruises for 30 days. And it was only about 634 rands for 30 days cruise. I had done that then, and well, Australia I did separately. Well, London was included in my tour, but I went back to London. I had friends there, and from London I did Scotland, Wales, and Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and I've covered up all of that. And when I went to Australia, I did the whole of Australia, the first trip, and the second trip I stayed in Darwin. The third trip, well, I have a relative there now, so I went to Sydney, to Brisbane, to the Gold Coast, which is too beautiful, and I have friends there. I stayed there, and so I love traveling, but it's just that financially it becomes a problem. And music I love, but unfortunately now that we're not running the band anymore. And
tell us about your experience with flying.
Yes, yeah, that when my husband was living, we were deciding to do the flying, but when he passed away, I said, no, I must take a parachute on my own. So I went to Virginia Airport and I took part. I had about 7 lessons. And it was very interesting, very, very interesting. I loved it. And but unfortunately, it was expensive, and I love traveling. So I had to choose between traveling and flying. So I thought I choose traveling, because I felt that even if I got through my flying lesson, even if I had my pilot license, I wasn't in the position to go and purchase myself an aircraft, which was very, very expensive. So I thought, no, I may as well choose traveling. So that is how I gave up flying. But it was those 7 lessons I had, I enjoyed it very, very much. And the mere fact that I had to go through a medical test to do the aviation, because that test was about 3 hours test. And the main thing they were concerned about is, well, everything practically, but the main thing they were concerned about is my heart. And they did an ECG, and they found that it was quite okay, because my instructor felt, I said, well, why are you all so strict? You know, I just want to fly. I'm not going to go and fly a big aircraft. And they said, no, he says, because if you go up and if you can't take the height, and if you've got a weak heart, he says, then it's dangerous. We can't allow you to fly. But fortunately, I had passed my medical test, and I had that opportunity of flying, for those 7 lessons.
And when did you start doing choreography?
For
the dances?
Oh, well, that from school days, I loved dancing, and my parents didn't like it. You know, they were more on the orthodox type, and they didn't like me to go and learn dancing. Otherwise, by now, I would have been a really, really good dancer, and they didn't allow me to go and learn dancing. And I remember at one stage, my school had a show, a school show, and that my parents didn't know. And I went and danced, and without them knowing, I was about 12 years and 14 years old.
Primary school.
Yeah. And then and they were poor. They went in the position to send me to high school, but it so happened that I won a bursary. I won a provincial bursary in Standard 6. And the bursary was just for 2 years. Therefore, I did not do my matric. What I did was, I did the Standard 7, and I did the T5 course, the teacher's 5th class training. That was at Girls' High. And I did those 2 years, and I started teaching in 1952. And thereafter, I went to the Tech, and I did my NJC. And I couldn't do my senior because in the meantime I had met my husband, although we weren't married, we were just courting, but he stopped me and he put me into the driving school. So I used to teach in the morning, and in the afternoon I used to teach driving, which was actually not fair because the education department never used to allow you to work while you're teaching, but I did it. And thereafter, when we married and I gave up, then he stopped me from teaching, school teaching, and he put me full-time into the driving school. That is how I got into the driving school. And when I took part in that motor car racing, my parents didn't know about it until they saw in the papers. People, well, they never used to buy paper. The people went and showed it to them.
What
and
was
then,
their reaction?
Oh, they were very angry, they were very cross. And well, my dad was late at that time, but my mom was very, very angry. Because she says, what if you killed yourself on the track? Who asked you to go and do things like this? This is for boys he says, you're behaving like a man, you're behaving like a boy. He says, you shouldn't go and do that. But it was already done. She couldn't do anything about it because it was already done. And I think it was just merely possessive, and she was scared. Really, I'm going to meet with an accident. What happened if I killed myself on the track?
You didn't have any other sisters?
Yes,
Yes.
We were 6 sisters. Well, 3 are late, and we just 3 of us.
And the other sisters, they didn't do all these adventures?
No. They all went to school, but I don't know, somehow they weren't very adventurous like me. I was more or less like a little tomboy. I never lost out on, never missed on anything. Whether it be sports or whether music or whatever, I always liked participating. And even now, I still love it. And that is why now when I don't feel too well, and if I go for a checkup, and recently the doctors discovered that I'm developing cold in my joints, and maybe osteoporosis. I told the doctor, I said, it's a real curse to be getting old. I wish I could be the same all the time. But it is a real curse. Then they told me, no, but you are growing old gracefully. He said, that's what you mean. Well, it's some consolation, but I still feel that it is a curse to be getting old, because I don't know if I'll be able to do all what I have been doing and what I am doing at a later stage. But I believe in making the best of my life. The few years that I've got, I'd like to make the best of it. Why not? Because, while we got the opportunity, do it.
Yeah, but that is fantastic that you are able to do it even at this age.
Yeah, but
Not many people can do that, hey?
Yeah, I suppose if they try, they can.
Yeah.
But you see, people adopt that attitude. Well, some people are old-fashioned. They feel, well, I'm old. And when they see me, because there was on one occasion, I visited an old-age home, and I was dressed, well, in my normal dressing, but I was, unless she felt that I was too modernly dressed. She passed a remark, she said, old people are trying to act young these days. But I mean, it hurt me a bit, but then I said, oh, be hell with her. I said, who cares? It's never too late to do anything. If you can dress properly, dress. And if you can sing or dance or play instruments or whatever, why not? Do it. It's never too late. Yeah. No, and I mean, lots of people ask me, how do you manage to keep your age? How do you manage? You still look young for your age. And what is the recipe? I tell them, well, my recipe is this. I am a vegetarian, and I'm a complete teetotaler. No smoking, no drinking, and I hard work. I don't have a maid. I even clean my car myself. I don't take it to the car wash. I do all my housework myself, and I do a bit of yoga asanas, and I still walk every evening. I still do my walk, and that's it. I said, that is a recipe. So there's no medication to keep me young and strong. And another thing, you've got to have a strong willpower. And you've got to have the determination. Well, I am a Scorpio, and they say Scorpions are determined people. If I want to do a thing, I end up doing it. And if I don't want to do it, I don't do it. So there's very few things that I don't want to do. Well, so far, with the help of God, I'm sort of managing to do whatever I like to do, and I want to do. And I hope God keeps it that way. But as I say, it's up to you. Life is what you make it.